Thanks very much. Okay, so on day one, well, the format of the workshop is over 3 days, 3 hours of content each. The mornings of the workshop, or the first half of the workshops, will be speakers from around the world, and the second half will be more of a kind of interactive workshop activity. So today we have a great set of speakers to introduce marine spatial planning and to describe the state of the field, after which we will then have a demonstration of marine spatial planning simulation, so kind of like a game. And there's an option to download the game and play during the afternoon session. I know there's a lot of questions going online of exactly how to download that. If you can play along, but it's not necessary. You can also just watch the demonstration online. On the second day, we are focusing on the missing layers of marine spatial planning and how to integrate across social, cultural, and ecological objectives. In the second half, we will have an interactive discussion on social and environmental justice with a focus on tools for decolonial feminist science. This activity will require you to complete a survey in advance, and we will disseminate that survey at the end of today's session. So the results of the survey that we complete will eventually form the content of this session, so please be sure to complete it to make this as interactive and as fun as possible. And then finally, on the third day, can you still hear me? I believe my screen sharing just dropped off.
It's back.
Hi, sorry about that. Okay, on the third day is how we're going to have a number of speakers that are looking at considering governance in marine spatial planning. And in the afternoon, we have a series of flash talks by students working in the marine spatial planning space. Okay, so we've had a whopping 681 people from across 82 different countries register for this workshop. We're really excited about this. Typically at international conferences, most attendees are from Europe and North America, but with this virtual format, we've seen an incredible diversity of countries being represented. So the countries with the highest number of registered attendees are Brazil with 76, Kenya with 59, and South Africa with 55. We are totally blown away with all the interest that we've received and are really excited about connecting with you all. So to help ensure that this workshop is a safe place, we do have a code of conduct. It's very simple and logical. And just a reminder for everyone to please keep yourself muted.
Vermelho e número de concentração.
And I'm just trying to gain controls of those settings. Okay, so code of conduct is very simple. The expected behaviour.
Somebody who's speaking Spanish, please mute your microphone.
Okay, expected behaviour is to treat everyone with respect and consideration, be considerate of the multitude of views and opinions that are different from your own, maintain the professional and cordial dialogue, and to make sure that you respect the copyright and intellectual property of all the speakers. Unacceptable behaviour is harassment, intimidation, or discrimination in any form, any abuse of any participants, speakers, organisers, or other workshop guests, and anyone that is requested to stop unacceptable behaviour is expected to comply immediately. If you do want to report any unacceptable behaviour, then please do just notify one of the workshop organisers. So an important part of this workshop is to make sure that you actually engage. So we have a couple of simple steps to help that out. So please block out time for all the scheduled workshop sessions. Use the WebEx chat feature to ask questions, and please make sure to keep yourself muted throughout the workshop. We do have the Hoover app software. This is designed to help networking across all the countries that we've seen. So you can create a research profile. This is what mine looks like here. You can join discussion boards, you can ask questions, you can share research, and you can even set up virtual side meetings if you wanted to have subgroups with other participants. If the workshop doesn't suit your time zone, then each session will be recorded and you'll be able to watch that session on the Hoover app. We have lots more details on exactly how to use the Hoover app and how to engage in the workshop. We have a document with lots of screenshots. If you go to the document section on the Hoover app, you'll be able to see this document engaging in the workshop. Now, the IMBeR organising committee recognises that there is ongoing discrimination against Black, Indigenous and people of colour in our societies, including academia, and we support taking positive steps to promote racial justice. The Shutdown Academia, Shutdown STEM, Black in the Ivory hashtags and other kind of related movements insist that we spend time to educate ourselves about systemic racism and progressive change. So in support of this, we are providing some resources online on the Hoover app under the document section, and we suggest that you take time during the workshop to think about concrete steps that you can take towards racial justice in the spaces and the organisations that you occupy. These resources are again in the document section of the Hoover app. And finally, and what has become very apparent this morning, that Murphy's Law means that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and this is particularly true in virtual meetings. We're doing all we can on our end to make sure that this runs as smoothly as possible. So thanks for bearing with us, and we hope you have a great time at this workshop. That's it from me, and so next I'm going to pass over to our first speaker of the workshop, Dr. Michelle Portman. Michelle heads the Mar-Coast Ecosystem Integration Lab at the Israel Institute of Technology. Her research focuses on aspects of integrated coastal zone management, marine spatial planning, management of marine protected areas, marine litter from land-based sources, and governance of the land-sea interface. And I'll pass it over to you, Michelle.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now I have to just share screen, just a minute.
His research aims to advance systematic conservation planning theory and practice through promoting and improving the integration of terrestrial, freshwater and marine conservation planning initiatives. His research explores theoretical and methodological aspects of decision-making problems associated with an integrated land-sea planning approach. Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you very much, Steph. Obviously, IMBeR co-organizers for inviting me to be part of this wonderful workshop. I'm really excited to be part of it, and I'm really looking forward also to listen to some of the other presentations. I also hope everyone is keeping well and healthy. I mean, this is quite strange and difficult times. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the contributors of this, which is a long-term transdisciplinary project, which was led by COBI, which is a Mexican NGO, and obviously, it also had participation of a big number of conservation scientists and managers from Mexico, the US, Australia, and the UK. So if people want to know a little bit more about that, the technical aspects of this project are described in this paper in Global Change Biology, which I would be more than happy to share through a link today if people are interested. The project integrates ecological connectivity, the effects of global warming, and socioeconomic considerations. And so to start with, so why ecological connectivity? Sorry, I guess I'll decline this annotation request, right? Yeah.
Could you say that again?
So I just got a request for annotation, so I'll just ignore it, right?
Yes, please just go ahead and give your presentation.
Yep, okay. So why ecological connectivity? So the literature is very clear. It shows that maintaining the movement of organisms within the conservation areas across entire seascapes is quite critical to maintaining the populations in the long term and to buffer also from the effects of disturbances such as, for example, overfishing, bleaching, cyclones, oil fields, and all the things. Further, it is well established that the way we design marine reserves is quite important, not only because it is not only to ensure the viability of marine populations within the marine reserve system, but also to replenish fish areas, sustaining the livelihoods of coastal communities across the world. So it is well established also that the way we design the way we design it from a technical point of view is important, and it has been advancing very rapidly. However, there are still few practical applications, and there is a need to develop and to test some of these approaches in what I call real world applications, like this case. So, what about global warming? So as we know, ecological systems are rapidly changing due to warming oceans, which means that the design of marine conservation systems also need to be adjusted accordingly to these changes. For example, the disturbance processes like coral reef bleaching or changes in the distribution of species and existence are major things that are rapidly changing the way our existence are functioning. And one particular concern are the potential changes in connectivity due to ocean warming, which may, in this case, warrant rethinking how we design conservation areas to account for these modifications. So for these reasons, it is well recognized that marine spatial planning processes or exercises, including the identification, for example, like in this case, of areas that we may want to protect, for example, using marine reserves, must take into account the noted changes. So, so what we did? So a project was undertaken in the Mid-Reef Islands region, so the Gulf of California. This is an area that has been widely recognized as a high priority for marine conservation, not only in Mexico, but also globally. It is an area that it is quite important for fishing because it sustains the livelihoods of several fishing communities all along both in the eastern and the western shores of the Gulf, as shown in this image. And the region, which was quite fortunate for us, is also has been extensively studied for many years. And in particular, there is really good knowledge about the oceanography and the ecological connectivity for several key species in the region. So this was an ideal case study where there's a need to do applied planning and where the information was ideal to undertake this exercise. So the project then aimed to complement existing MPAs and conservation initiatives in the region. And I mean this, and I say this is very important because we know MPAs and marine reserves are not the only solution in the suite of tools and things that we can do for marine conservation. So in this case, we focus on the design of a network of marine reserves that can achieve 4 objectives. The first one noted here is representation. So we wanted to represent all the key habitats and species associated with rocky reefs, which in this case are key existence in the region that sustain high levels of marine biodiversity and that are also species of conservation and commercial value and concern. Second, we wanted to maximize connectivity within the marine reserve system to ensure that the long-term persistence of these species was ensured. And we focused on larval dispersal because it was considered a key process, and we had good, as I said, we had good information about it. Third, we wanted to ensure that larval connectivity was maintained under possible future warming conditions. And finally, and very importantly, we wanted to ensure that the socioeconomic impacts associated with the implementation of the network were minimized, so we could maximize compliance and eventually the long-term effectiveness of the network. So, so what we did is we set representation objectives for the work consistent with the rarity and the level of threat of different species and ecosystems. And we used the most up-to-date databases for species in the region, and we use this information to create species distribution models for more than 200 species of fish and invertebrates, like the one shown here. We also created updated maps to represent the occurrence of marine ecosystems in the region, including rocky reefs areas, mangrove, seagrass, sargassum, and other areas. And we identified also things like spawning aggregation areas that were targeted as well. In terms of socioeconomic considerations, we set representation of, we incorporated this aspect mainly through the estimation of the opportunity cost of implementing such a network in terms of the potential economic losses for artisanal and industrial fisheries in the region, which is the main use in that area of the Gulf. So our model incorporated information about catch probability, biomass, and market value of commercial fish and invertebrates that are fished by these fleets. And we use a parameterized bioeconomic model that is called Atlantis. It's used in other places around the world too. And this one incorporates environmental and economic information to essentially estimate the parameters that we need for this opportunity cost model to essentially estimate how much fishers would lose in different areas of the region if these areas were close to fishing. To incorporate functional connectivity, which is what we focus on in terms of connectivity, we use information about the dispersal patterns of 3 focal species, which in this case are representative of species of commercial and conservation importance in the region. So these species have different larval dispersal patterns due to their biological features, such as planktonic larval duration and the timing of their spawning. And these are key parameters that were used to parameterize our physical dispersal model that we use to estimate the current and the future connectivity patterns under, in this case, a possible ocean warming scenario. And so what we did is we follow what we call a graph theoretical approach to incorporating connectivity, which essentially characterizes the importance of different areas, or in graph theory framework, nodes, to maintain the overall connectivity of the network. And I'll explain this a little bit more in a second. So essentially, we use a larval dispersal model to estimate the probability that larvae were transported from any region of the Gulf to any other region within this planning area. So given that increases in ocean temperatures are estimated that will reduce the planktonic larval duration of this of this species, what we did is we adjusted the value of the PLD for each focal species to estimate the potential reduction of larval dispersal and those potential changes in connectivity due to ocean warming, which is shown in the panels below the in the 2 panels below my screen. So what is this graph theoretical approach? So using the larval dispersal model that I just described, as I said, we estimated the probability that the larvae are transported across the whole region. And with this information, we estimated how important each of these units were for representing, essentially for maintaining the connectivity across the whole system. So we identified 2 types of units or areas that we then use to calculate some network metrics. The first one, which we called hubs, are units that will maximize the larval flow throughout the whole network. And we, among the many metrics available, we decided to use eigenvector centrality. The second one is we identify areas that we denote as stepping stones, which are areas that represent units that if you remove them from the system, they can have significant fragmenting effects on the network because they are linking areas that otherwise would be disconnected. And in this case, we use a metric called betweenness centrality to identify these regions in the network. So both features were identified and targeted as connectivity features in the prioritization analysis. which we did to identify what we call an optimal configuration of marine reserves. In this case, we used Markson, which is the conservation planning software mentioned earlier by Michelle, and which is one of the most widely used conservation planning software so far. So to integrate information on connectivity and opportunity costs, we explore the effects of increasing the amount of protected area in the overall connectivity, which in this case is denoted by network connectedness. So what we did is we checked how much the opportunity cost of the system changed as we increase the protection levels. So in typical exercises, the amount of protection would be incidentally, the amount of connectivity will be incidentally increased as we increase the area protected. And that is shown by the area that is, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but the area, the dark line. Well, in this case, when we specifically target areas that act as hubs or stepping stones, then we can increase the connectivity without increasing the opportunity cost as much, which is what we did in this exercise. And so following this approach, essentially, we designed these three versions of the network. So the first one is focusing only on representing species and habitats. This regards connectivity and climate change. The second one, or S2, adds the connectivity features given the current larval dispersal patterns. And the third one incorporates also connectivity, but uses the reduced connectivity patterns by reducing the PLD due to the expected ocean temperature increase in the region. So while the three reserves incur very similar opportunity costs, which was one of our key criteria, and they seem fairly similar just by looking at them, there are notable differences. For example, there is slightly larger and slightly closer, both S2 and S3. However, the connectivity patterns are quite different, as we can see in this panel slide. So in terms of connectivity, what these figures are telling us is that the links between the marine reserves, in this case of larval dispersal for one of our key species, both types of targeting with or without climate change result in networks that are more dense, and we expect that the flow of larvae between the reserves is higher. So in this case, the blue dots or the nodes represent the different marine reserves in the system, and you can see very clearly that the patterns of S2 and S3, both under the current and the warmer ocean scenarios, are higher. So to finalize, our results show that while the proposed approach can help planners to design better connected marine reserves, even in conditions where future climate scenarios predict reduction in PLD, for example, in this case, and larval dispersal. However, there are several aspects that can be improved. The first one is that we didn't consider the effects of temperature and acidification on larval development, behavior, or survival, which can be quite important. There's obviously many more species that we could model, including winter spawners, which spawn at slightly different times of the year, and for the same reasons are subject to slightly different currents in the Gulf. We also didn't include changes in the ocean currents because we didn't have the information at the time, but we were working on something like this. We can obviously improve the dispersal model in many ways, and one of them is incorporating explicitly aspects of demography and the dispersal of adults, not only larvae. And we expect that there would be some shifts in the distribution and abundance of some species and habitats, which usually will modify also the connectivity patterns. So just to wrap up, some key lessons out of this work is that ongoing adaptive implementation of the networks is quite critical. So in this case, as I said, we were working mainly on designing marine reserves, but including other type of other effective conservation measures will be quite critical to the implementation of this network. The strong leadership of COVID, the local organization that was heading this process, was quite critical, and that was based on long-term networks with fishers and NGOs and government agencies in the region. There were also a lot of capacity building activities like teaching local researchers and managers to use GIS and planning tools and optimization tools like Marksan, which is a long-term goal of the project. And finally and foremost, that we think that the early and long-term participation of stakeholders, in this case, for example, fishers that participated in the monitoring of the fish and invertebrates that we used to target in the region, in this exercise, were quite critical for the uptake and for the future of the network. With that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, just drop them on the chat, and I'll try to address them. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. That was wonderful. We will take any questions in the chat, and we'll come back to that during the Q&A session. Our next speaker is Mandy Lombard. Mandy, would you be able to take control of the screen? Perfect. Thank you. I'll introduce you now. Yes, I can see that. So Dr. Mandy Lombard is from the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. Mandy focuses on applied research that can be implemented for effective, sustainable use outcomes and has a special interest in systematic conservation planning, top predators, and systems analysis. She designed South Africa's Prince Edward Island Marine Protected Area in the Southern Ocean, and her current work includes biophysical mapping, decision support tool development, marine spatial planning, and integrated ocean management. Thank you, Mandy.
Hi, good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever everybody is. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so my title is to talk about the challenges and opportunities of marine spatial planning in South Africa. I've really enjoyed the two previous sessions because both Michelle and Jorge spoke to things that are very close to my heart across the South African seascape. So just to give you an idea of where we are, we're at the bottom of the African continent. South Africa has South Atlantic Ocean, Southern Ocean, and Southwest Indian Ocean borders. And my university is based in the southeast of the country in Algoa Bay, which I will touch on towards the end of my presentation. So just to give you an idea of our exclusive economic zone, we have essentially two bits because we have the continental margin and we also have the Prince Edward Islands in the Southern Ocean, batting above their area in terms of EEZ area that is assigned to them. But South Africa has a very strategic position in this part of the meeting of three different ocean masses. We don't have a lot of borders with other countries, but we have a very long border with the high seas. And so anything to do with areas beyond national jurisdiction are, of course, extremely interesting to us. We have recently passed in 2018 a Marine Spatial Planning Act. So our marine spatial planning is quite far down the line in terms of policy, but the act has not yet been implemented. We still have to wait for an announcement from government to say that the act is now actually implemented. But the policy is there and it has a long and arduous story behind it, which I won't bore you with. But the geographic and sort of biological features of the country are such that we have the very fast Agulhas current, warm tropical current on our east coast with low productivity and high diversity. And on our west coast, we have the Benguela current, which is very low temperature, very high productivity, and low diversity. On the Agulhas bank, between the two currents, is an area of mixing, and that is where our continental shelf is subject to lots of research. So in terms of products to inform marine spatial planning, me coming from very much a conservation background, my products that I'm interested in producing are within the biophysical realm. We are quite far down that route. So we have good data on ecosystems. or habitats or ecoregions or whatever you want to call them. Obviously, fine-scale data inshore and guesswork offshore. For the Prince Edward Islands in the bottom right, that is the result of our most recent National Biodiversity Assessment, with quite a bit of modeling involved there as opposed to actual data collected. In terms of the distribution of ocean uses, we have also done a pretty good job over the last 15 years. We have managed to pull together in spatial formats information on most of our offshore uses, working closely with government and with departments who collect these data. And we're able to depict them not only as spatial occurrence, but also various forms of intensity, which is important. Just for those who don't know, 99% of our EEZ is under petroleum or oil and gas license, whereas recently, and by recently I mean last year, we've gone from 0.4 to 5% of our ocean area now under protection. So the big news down south here is that we have 20 new marine protected areas, which took a very, very long time. In fact, it took 10 years for us to actually bring this to fruition. And Dr. Kerry Sink from South African National Biodiversity Institute led this initiative, and we're incredibly happy that it finally got through. So if we talk about what the challenges are for our marine spatial planning, we just need to take a step back for a second to 2014-2015, where the National Development Plan of South Africa came up with what they call the 9-point plan, which was to accelerate economic growth. And I emphasize the word growth. And the idea was to resolve unemployment, poverty, and inequality through this economic growth. The fifth point in the 9-point plan, so point 5, was to grow the ocean's economy. So I want you to look at those words clearly. From this need or perceived need to grow an economy from the ocean, Operation Phakisa was launched, and Operation Phakisa means to hurry up, and it was modeled on a Malaysian process where putting people together in a room intensively for a short amount of time gave high-level results very quickly. And again, Phakisa was to unlock the economic potential of the oceans. Now, you might have picked up by now that I take a bit of issue with that terminology, but nonetheless, from Operation Phakisa, we have the Marine Spatial Planning Act of 2018. So that was something that happened fairly quickly. But I just want to speak to the emerging career folks and the people that are starting off a career in marine spatial planning. There is something called the economic trap. I just made that word up myself. But in the past, the world has gone along a linear economy trajectory where resources are removed from the world, production and consumption ensue, trash happens at the end, and all of that is thrown out somewhere because some environment can soak it up. And there's been a lot of talk for a lot of time to convert linear economies into circular economies. And I'm not an economist, so I won't go into this, but for those who are interested in how the economy drives our interaction with the oceans, take a look at some of the literature on circular economies and try to figure out how we can embed those in MSP processes. So in South Africa, what Phakisa did with the terminology it was using, it was over-promising, it has under-delivered, and it has raised expectations of people across the country that the ocean is now going to save them economically. And I call this linear economy model the Houston, we have a problem model. So what happens with a model like that is I always use this picture in my presentations, thanks to Chu and Pete Jones. In 2016, they published this paper, which allows us to compare ecosystem-based MSP, which I think Michelle mentioned earlier. We're all on the same page that we want this. But in reality, integrated use MSP is kind of what's unfolding in the real world. Mostly, I would say, currently in the EU, but I'm not an expert on that, so I can't I don't want to put my neck out. But in terms of ecosystem-based MSP, the theory is that ecosystem conservation or natural health, healthy oceans underpin society, and that everything we do as humans sits on that foundation. Whereas integrated use MSP sits on a foundation of economic growth, and ecosystem conservation or healthy oceans are just seen as a pillar in society. It's just another use. It's just another stakeholder. And then words like balancing come along, where one wants to balance this stakeholder with the oil and gas stakeholder. So on the left, if we look at ecosystem-based MSP, if the ecosystems collapse, so the whole of society collapses. And we've seen that happen in a number of places, but there are people who will argue that you can transform environments completely and you can still have a functioning society. And that's a philosophical point of departure. If we go back to the right, integrated use MSP says that if your ecosystems collapse, you've just lost one pillar and the rest of society can carry on quite fine, thank you. So that's just an introduction to the two different models. And because of the economic model, the integrated use MSP model actually winning out most of the time over the ecosystem-based model, this then moves us into the world of challenges. So as South Africa's MSP has unfolded over the last few years, if I had to, off the top of my head, say what are the challenges, in terms of governance, we don't have an umbrella act, an Oceans Act, under which to nest our MSP. Pakisa said, you've got to rush off, you've got to get yourself an MSP Act, and that happened, but there was no bunch of principles that were pulled together. There was no umbrella act that said, okay, we want MSP to do the following. It was also rolled out as a very top-down approach. It was run by governments. At the time, we have a new government now, but at that time, state capture, elite capture, and corruption were driving the process. The status of our act is that it is not yet in operation, and I see that as a challenge. There were a lot of power dynamics when we tried to get the MPAs gazetted, because there was a standoff with Department of Minerals, where they wanted the 99% of the country which is under mining license to stay put, but they didn't want us to have 5% under MPAs. So I call this the winner takes all scenario, where the powerful voice in the room is the winner. The process that was followed to build the Act and to get comment into the Act was exclusionary. So civil society was not encouraged, although there was a little bit of opportunity to comment. It wasn't a bottom-up approach at all. I think the stakeholder tick box was what was going on at the time, and South Africa was also basing its MSP on Northern Hemisphere models, which I would argue are not appropriate for our country. The institutions that were unfolding and getting our Act together were still pretty much sitting in their silos. The MSP Act brought a lot of confusion around mandates. The Act was actually nested in the Department of Environment, which then made the Department of Environment's job difficult to argue for the ecosystem stakeholders when they were the ones who were wearing the overall MSP hat. There was also no proper integration, and I think Michelle also alluded to this. The Acts talk about integration, but they can't actually do it. And there was also a lot of lack of capacity in terms of government personnel to understand what MSP was actually about. I've already spoken about the economic model that's being followed is something that I don't think is sustainable. MSP, again, I think Michelle mentioned, it's seen as the savior, but actually it's just an area-based management tool that has to be viewed within integrated ocean management as an overarching umbrella. So MSP needs to talk to fisheries management. It needs to talk to adaptive and dynamic management and seasonal closures and openings, maybe for fishing, maybe for whales migrating, maybe for something else. But it has to be seen in this bigger environment of integrated ocean management. In South Africa's case, the policy coherence was not there. So when the MPAs were declared, they were within 5 minutes, there were 18 court cases because various industries had felt that they had not been consulted, which was actually not true, because over 10 years, all the industries were consulted. And finally, the biggest challenge was because of Operation Phikisa, the country rushed it. They rushed off to say, we have a Marine Spatial Planning Act, but they didn't build relationships along the way to ensure that it was easily implementable, understandable, and accepted. So those are the challenges. What are the opportunities? The opportunities is that Parliament speaks for the people in South Africa, and they have started to prick their ears up, and they've started to listen to those of us who are moaning and whining about the exclusionary process that's unfolded and how civil society has not been invited to the table. So Parliament is listening, and that's a very big first step. South Africa also can play a leadership role in the region. We have the Benguela Current Convention, to which we are signatory on our west coast, the Nairobi Convention on our east coast, and the Camelot Convention down in the Southern Ocean. So being signatory to all of those conventions and having a lot of academic and civil society expertise in this field, we believe we can play a leadership role in the region. Our institutions have got good capacity, not so much at the moment in terms of government, but certainly in the private sector and the academic and the NGO sector. There's a lot of experience. We've been doing systematic planning and marine spatial planning for 15 years, and we feel that we want to be heard, and we are becoming very quickly transdisciplinary. It's difficult, but we're having to do it, and we are walking in that direction. We have lots of partnerships and funding that are ongoing. We're trying to build a lot more relationship with government. The NGOs, the academic institutions, and the private sectors are starting to play together very nicely, and we've raised significant money to help us understand marine spatial planning issues. The process that we are developing at our university is very much focused on stakeholders. It's focused on a systems approach and scenario planning and model building for marine spatial planning, which is not something that's easy to do. There's not blueprint out there on how to proceed using a systems approach and how to build these models. So we've all had to move from our quantitative systematic conservation planning hats, where we feel very comfortable, into this area where we have to play with people and we have to develop social capital. And that's been difficult for biophysical scientists. Just to end off then, the IMBeR project that we are running is a project that has received an enormous amount of funding. And through this project, we have built what we call the IMBeR Marine Planning Tool. It started off with a causal loop diagram to try to get a handle on what we ended up calling the Marine Sustainability Index for the Bay. And this is subject to my PhD student, Esti Vermeulen. This is her PhD. And she's getting a handle on the interactions of the different stakeholders on ocean health. So if X goes down, does Y go up? And if Y goes up, does that impact on our sustainability index? And this process is being driven through stakeholders within the Bay coming to the table and working with us. One can interact with it through an online portal, and the outputs of the model are these behavior over time graphs. So we are trying to couple spatial models with temporal models. That's what we're currently busy with. So we're trying to get the outputs of the system dynamic models. So for example, here, the oysters per year that can be harvested might go down under a certain scenario. And at the same time that that goes down, other things might go up. So what we are doing is looking at the interactions and relationships between different sectors, and we're measuring different things over and then running them through scenarios over time to try to reach scenarios that our stakeholders can live with and find acceptable. And that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I've just ended up off with a slide from the Comores, where we recently were doing a survey and found the most beautiful soft corals at a very deep depth, something that actually came up in a trawl, which was very, very sad. But it's just to say that there's beautiful stuff out there, and this is why we do what we do. Thank you. That's the end of me.
Thanks very much, Mandy. That was a great talk. Next, we have Dr. Vanessa Stelzenmuller, who will be speaking. Vanessa, are you able to speak and share the screen?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'll just introduce you as you share your screen. So Vanessa heads the research unit on marine spatial management at the Human Institute of Sea Fisheries in Bremerhaven, Germany. Vanessa has coordinated various national projects and international tasks in relation to risk assessment and marine spatial planning. She advises the German MSP process and contributes and chairs to a number of ICES expert groups. Thank you, Vanessa. We can see your screen.
Yeah, so thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about some challenges for the revision of the Marine Spatial Plan of the Germany ESAT of the North Sea. So basically, the first round of the Marine Spatial Plan has been implemented in 2009. And as you can see on that figure, it has basically, it works with priority areas and reservation areas. So priority area means a certain use is giving priority over another use. And as it's the case for most plans in Northern Europe, it has been really driven by the expansion of the offshore renewables. And so it's important here to mention that within the areas designated for offshore wind farms, no other uses are possible, and also this the restriction of uses that applies also for the 500-meter safety zone. So, and this, after a decade now, this plan is now under revision. So the planners, the respective authority, has set out from the beginning that the new plan or the revised plan should be more integrated. It should also try to implement an ecosystem approach. It should consider environmental targets and also the trends of sectoral developments. And they really wanted to consider changes in recent legislations, sectoral plans, and also look into the project findings of scientific projects. And this is particularly the last point I would like to focus on a couple of minutes. So on the right-hand side, you can see the process that has been laid out, how the revision process is going to look like. And we are right in the middle of that. Just a couple of weeks ago, the draft revised plan has been published. So for the next slides, I would like to introduce you to some conflicts and synergies that have been emerging over the last 10 years after the implementation of the offshore, of the implementation of the Marine Spatial Plan. This is the North Sea, the southern North Sea. You can see it's a very busy area. So the areas in blue are basically the areas that are planned for offshore renewables, offshore wind development, and in green are nature conservation sites. So basically the key conflict that emerged from the planning activities or planning offshore renewables have been in between offshore renewables and nature conservation and offshore renewables and fisheries. So also we see in some research developing over the last years that looked into co-use options and synergies with the renewables, for example, renewables in aquaculture. And also, we also conducted quite some work and to understand the spatial temporal adaptations of fishing activities due to the loss of fishing grounds and the consequences, specifically the socio-ecological consequences to these displacements. And we also see that planning, that national planning has really cross-border effects, economic effects, since we have international fisheries in our EEZs. So, but because in Germany we have been on the forefront of installing offshore wind farms, we are now having a discussion on what are the emerging fisheries benefits that we can expect from these man-made structures. So we can see first results, empirical results really, on the effects on benthic communities, on benthic biomass due to these artificial reef structures such as the monopiles, so it's good protection. Also, we can see that marine mammals are more often visiting these sites, and already we have, based on tagging studies, we can see them forage behavior. And there are also expectations on the potential spillover of biomass of fish and decapods such as brown crab from offshore wind farms. So, and this is the point I would like to talk to you in a little bit more detail. I would like to report a bit on a case study we conducted about 20 kilometers off the island of Helgoland, which is an offshore island, and it took us 1.5 years of hard negotiation with a wind farm owner or business to let them to convince them to let us in to do some really empirical work. So what we did, we really wanted to understand if we can see some spillover effects from offshore wind farms into the vicinity of the monopile. So we have sampled at 41 stations. We deployed baited pots, chains, so pots in a chain, and we let them soak for 24 hours. So what we wanted to really catch is brown crab. This is what you see on the right-hand side, Cancer pagurus. It's culturally very locally an interesting resource, but we can see in the southern North Sea, this resource is gaining more and more importance. And so this is why it's a very interesting case, and it's a passive gear fisheries, so with a very selective gear. So here you can see some preliminary results. Basically, you can see on the x-axis the distance to the nearest turbines, and you can see the total catches for smaller and larger crabs. So basically, the message is here that we can see a decrease of catches, the increasing distance of the monopiles. And also what has been very interesting for us, that we found small and large crabs aggregating somehow around the monopiles, which is an indication that these areas can function as a nursery area. So this has been a very local case study, and we really wanted to see if we can see spatial temporal adaptations of the fishing effort around the offshore wind farms, so fishing effort by fleets targeting Cancer pagurus, targeting decapods. So basically we used the VMS data, and in particular for this type of fisheries, it has been very hard to clean the data and to really differentiate between fishing and steaming and other noise within the data. So, so the key message, or the thing that emerged, is what you can see on the right-hand side. We can see over the last years, within the last 4 or 5 years, an increase of fishing effort, particularly at distances smaller than 5 kilometers to the offshore wind farms. And this is around 20 to 40 meters depth. This is the area where the offshore wind farms are installed. So looking at the other extreme, at distances above 30 kilometers from the offshore wind farms, we can see that there's not much change of fishing efforts. So these are established habitats. So basically the main result is here that we can see some evidence at smaller distances to the offshore wind farms that there seems to be a fisheries benefit, or some new type of fisheries that has been established over the last couple of years. So, and as I promised before, just in July 2020, the revised plan, or the draft revised plan, has been published. It's now going to be in the consultation phase, but it's in German. I apologize, but I try to translate as best as I can. So basically, so the key points I would like to mention here, that we can see in blue this area for shipping. This has been enlarged and aligned to the neighbor countries. And you can see larger areas in red. These are the priority areas for offshore renewables. And here, the idea is to really meet the nations, or the Germany's targets of 20 gigawatt until 2030. This is why we have these areas considered. Another important point is the spatial designation of marine conservation areas. So we have marine conservation areas that has been implemented under a different European legislation. So the Natura 2000 sites, which have been drawn or the process has been driven by the European Habitats and Birds Directive, but now this is part of the Marine Spatial Plan, so it has been integrated. In a textual way, the multi-use options and compatible uses are now going to be assessed by each activity that's going to be placed. And when fisheries is concerned, we can see now there's a reservation area for fishery. This is a small arrow that's pointing up in the north. This is a fishery for Norway lobster. This is another crustacean species which likes very distinct habitats, and this is why it's one of the few fisheries that is really can really pinpoint to a certain place. And now here comes the interesting part. There are now in the text some suggestions to allow passive gear fisheries up to 300 meters to the offshore wind farms. And this kind of 300-meter distance has been, of course, influenced by the results, by the empirical evidence that we produced. And this is leading me, or this brings me back to the challenges from a scientific perspective for the revision process. So from a scientist's perspective, to advise marine spatial planning process. So key to this is really to account for the socio-ecological complexity of resource uses such as fisheries. So socio-ecological complexity means it's really to understand what's happening. Do we see something like a spillover? And what would it mean to have sustainable fisheries going on? What would be the kind of management that the plan should encompass? So, and then as we have seen in the draft plan that the targets for green energy, also for renewable energy, has been implemented in the plan, has been planned for. So the question is, for example, can marine spatial planning really contribute also to the long-term adaptive capacity of fisheries, to, for example, more flexible measures? So just identifying important fishing grounds is not really enough, and it's not, we really need the forward look, also mentioning here the climate change effects. So, when we do this kind of work, we also see the big gap on international monitoring data that allows us to extrapolate ecological effects of offshore wind farms to more ecosystem scales. And also, when you would like to quantify the economic effects for fisheries, for example, you immediately run into the trap of the lack of data, and you have problems in trying to quantify really effects and potentials for fisheries. And what we see, well, from a scientific perspective, trying to engage with the offshore renewable industry, that we see, or I see, that marine spatial planning really has a role in facilitating also a better collaboration between sectors to enable, for example, a smooth data collection, and to collaborate and to improve really the dialogue to get a better knowledge and to really have new data. And my last point, I think, is the take-home message from this is understanding ecological and economic effects of the plans is key for revising marine spatial planning. So only when we have a better understanding what the plan does or what the effects are, the plan can, in the new round, can have more precisions on regulations for example, decommissioning, or regulations, for example, for passive gear fisheries. So with that, I would really like to thank and acknowledge my colleagues that contributed substantially to this work, and I would like to thank you again for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Our next speaker is Dr. Leopoldo Gerhardina. Leopoldo, are you able to? Oh, thank you very much. Leopoldo is a research fellow at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. He works in different research topics ranging from marine ecology and ethnoecology to most recently the theory and practice of ocean governance. Beyond academia, he's also actively involved in building maritime knowledge to action networks, using web-based tools and cross-disciplinary facilitation approaches to foster new types of voluntary engagement for improved governability and healthier oceans. Thank you, Leopoldo. You can see your screen.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'll be talking about my experience with network knowledge to action in support of marine spatial planning implementation in Brazil. So perhaps just a brief introduction here of the main topic. My research departs from the need to rightfully place ecosystem capacity, social justice, and inclusiveness in blue economy discourse. Is not something that is not often looked is the social equity pillar. So I'm really concerned about how these developments in blue economies are taking shape, as well as other social marine sciences are following up how this is unfolding. Also, we're going to talk a lot about the role of area-based marine management in sustainable development. This UN Environment recent report have found that area-based approach crosscuts, their outcomes crosscuts many SDGs. So it's really an approach to be looking for. And MSP is well fit within these approaches. Also, I'd like to highlight the potential of transdisciplinary solutions to face complexity in environmental governance overall, but also just sustainability transition management or sustainability experiments, social innovation labs, learning networks, knowledge networks, and other terms that refers to groups of people with different backgrounds that comes together to find solutions for pretty complex governance situations. So let's talk a bit about the opportunity context for inter-network-led transformation of area-based governance in Brazil. Based on the theory of transformative agency conceptualized in a multi-level governance context, this paper in Frontiers of Marine Science built on our recent interdisciplinary research in Brazil to explore the opportunities for transformation in dynamic, complex, multi-level field of ocean governance in Brazil. So for each of the three case studies, this paper characterized their respective phases in the transformation from a fragmented sectoral to an integrated and ecosystem-based ocean governance regime. For instance, in 2018, we hypothesized that the Brazilian national level ocean governance system was on the brink of undergoing major transformation, but while the new ultra-conservative federal government that is in place since early 2019 has caused much backlash in environmental policy and democratic structures, and hence further restrained major innovations, I argue that the recommendations derived from the application of the theory of transformative agency in this paper remains valid. In other words, it is critical to lower the resilience of the dominant system by convening activities and giving sense to collective action, encouraging actors and mobilizing resources. And this is partly what I've done with many other colleagues in a program that I will talk about in a minute. So in this another paper in ocean and coastal management, we compile and review documents and minutes from selected ocean governance forums in Brazil to unveil the genesis of an MSP arena in the country. We identified several phases from the inception of the idea in 2011 to a phase of resistance towards the idea of MSP through to the blossoming of an MSP agenda in Brazil, and finally a later and quiescent phase when the agenda seemed to become stagnated in the articulation and framing of MSP pre-planning phase. So you must mind that Brazil has been undergoing political turmoil and institutional instability for some time, and of course this affects many other policy agendas in the country. So these are the high-level public forums whose documents were investigated with a focus on the identification of reported challenges and opportunities for MSP in Brazil. So hundreds of meeting minutes were coded and analyzed through to identify what MSP has been all about in such forums. So in this and subsequent papers of this series, we are using the interactive governance analytical framework whereby governability is the total capacity that a socio-political entity has to govern a system. A functional governability analysis therefore encompasses careful consideration of 5 dimensions, 1 to 5 in the center column. In this paper, we coded all reported challenges and opportunities against their associated functional governability dimensions. This analysis enabled the identification of critical functional governability narratives for advancing MSP in Brazil. We'll come back on each of these in our conclusions later, but just after we check the results of another paper of the series on the Brazilian MSP that also uses the same governability lenses. So this, in this paper published only a couple of weeks ago, entitled Crafting a Sustainability Transition Experiment for the Brazilian Blue Economy, we reflect on the required conceptual elements and programmatic indicators for national and marine spatial planning implementation as a major operational driver of a blue economy pathway for Brazil. And we also explore which ways the perceptions from high-level federal government authority that are directly involved with MSP innovation in the country can be used to inform the co-design of an ocean sustainability transition experiment in Brazil. So the paper focuses in the analysis of perceptions from representatives of the Shared Use of Marine Environment Working Group, which gather formally appointed members or think tanks of federal government ministries with the objective of discussing and proposing guidelines for advancing Brazil's MSP at the exclusive economic zone level. So we designed a focus group protocol and held 13 sessions, focus group sessions with 12 out of 17 ministries that are involved with the working group, about 28 participants. And the focus group protocol focused in prototyping a MSP-based ocean sustainability transition experiment for the country, which encompassed the envisioning of key conceptual elements of a blue economy vision and also outlining the principal indicators of a transition experiment. So we used a slightly adapted version of the evaluative scheme for sustainability transition experiments proposed by Lederitz and collaborators after a review of over 60 cases of social innovation processes around the globe in areas such as food, climate, and energy transitions. This model was designed to be generic, comprehensive, operational, and formative. Hence, we adapted it for use in an ocean policy context. So this is how it looks like. We have here a large sheet of paper in front of the group, printed with the evaluative model layout and adapted to include at the center the visioning of what the blue economy elements ought to be for our informants, followed by citations related to inputs, processes, outputs, and outcomes from the experiments they are envisioning. So all 471 citations from 13 focus groups were digitalized and analyzed through open coding or selective coding using the specific models, criteria set, and indicators. Some results. This radar graph illustrates what the key conceptual elements of a future ocean economy vision ought to be for the country in our informant's perspective. The most cited elements were that such a vision should go beyond government to be truly nested within long-term state economic policy and value the environmental viability of the economy. Therefore, many informants highlight the need for improved governance frameworks and strategic planning, better able to engage and sensitize stakeholders and prioritize ongoing innovations, including valuing the bioeconomy, combating marine pollution, and diversifying the energy metrics towards a low-carbon society through technological development. A focus on advancing resources exploitation as well was really present, such as fisheries, tourism, algae agriculture, genetic and mining resources extraction. Well, it is noteworthy that social equity was not pointed as an important element of Brazil's blue economy, nor there were many mentions to transparency, ecosystem-based management, social license, and science and technology, amongst other aspects deemed important in truly sustainable and equitable blue economies. So when we look at the most cited evaluative criteria or indicators mentioned as critical to foster an MSP-based sustainability experience in Brazil, we find two major future solution narratives cross-cutting our informants' perceptions. The principal narrative enacts that the need for outcomes, such as actionable knowledge, in turn also linked to inputs of specific expertise in the experiment. This reveals a largely technocratic view of advancing MSP through contributions from spatial data scientists and economists, for instance. A second narrative enacts the need for inputs such as financial support for generating structural, social, institutional change outcomes related to management through novel collaborative processes with appropriate methodologies. It is noteworthy also, though, that not much consideration was placed on accountability, intra and intergenerational equity, transparency, and other critically important indicators, as you can see here from the low frequency of those citations. Well, some of our concluding remarks. The analysis of documents from key environmental governance forums and the exploration of the perceptions from high-level government think tanks on the co-design of a sustainability transition experiment rendered essential insights for each of the 5 functional ocean governability dimensions. These are critical narratives for building Brazil's capacity to govern the ocean and includes, well, on the presence and quality of interactions, information, sharing, co-learning, collaborative learning, and adaptiveness. We found that it is critical to streamline cross-network knowledge exchange to improve the nascent MSP arena. And a sustainability transition experiment may promote a process framework for improving the overall presence and quality of area-based governance-related knowledge exchange. Concerning the fitness of governing elements, in other words, the actions, instruments, and assumptions, how these elements are match or fit to properties of the systems that are being governed, such as the social and natural systems, its dynamics, scales, complexities, and diversity. How is this match? So we found that it is critical to further understand the institutional dynamics that are impeding policy integration. Much more research needs to be put on this question. A sustainability experiment can support the policy innovators' quest for integrated governance through imagination and rationalization of appropriate or radical institutional change. So on the responsiveness of governing modes, I'm talking about self-governance, which is led by civil society, or collaborative governance, co-led by multiple organizations, and also hierarchical governance led by government authorities. We argue for the importance of achieving a more symmetrically responsive ocean governance arena, whereby different state powers are also in synergy, and because in Brazil there is some activities ongoing in Parliament and others by civil society and others by the federal government. So we need more symmetrically responsive approaches. And in this regard, the experiment may provide space for streamlining such disparate governance responses into co-evolutionary pathways. On the performance of governing other orders, so the 3 orders. The first order is the day-by-day problem solving and opportunity creation in governance. The second order would be institutional building new policies, and the third order thinking about the meta values, norms, and principles that governs the marine spatial planning agenda. So we recognize the need to promote coordinated scaling of innovative principle-based policy building. Need to come together different places, subnational case studies that are working and finding solution. We need to come together and coordinate the scaling through of these innovations. And of course, the experiment help us measure improvements in the performance of innovative governance attempts. In relation to the enabling and restrictive role of power relations, I'm talking about inclusiveness, representativeness, participation. Well, it's very important to strengthen critical but proactive civil society participation at multiple interrelated area-based ocean governance innovation frontlines. And a sustainability experiment may allow for involved parties to confront asymmetric power relations in the shaping of a more environmentally sustainable and socially equitable ocean economy. And just briefly, I'm part of this network, which is called PAINEL-MAR, Brazilian Future Ocean Panel. We have 8 teams, research action teams that are working through transdisciplinary approaches. And we usually gather in Brasilia, the capital city, to go to parliament, do in situ interviews with using transdisciplinary methodologies. And some of these papers are also part of our thinking in relation to the practice in this program, the Brazilian Oceanic Horizon Program. So you can find more information on our website. And thanks so much for the opportunity of being here. And I hope you like it, our slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leopoldo. We're now going to move to our final speaker for this session, from Dr. Gunnar Sander from the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. Leopoldo, if you are able to, thank you. And Gunnar, if you're able to share your screen. Gunnar, I can see that you're there, but you're currently on mute if you are trying to speak.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to unmute, and neither do I manage to upload the presentation.
I can hear you now. If you move your mouse to the bottom of the WebEx meeting, there should be a button that says Share Content, and you'll be able to share your screen. Are you there, Gunnar? Okay, well, in the meantime, while we try and deal with these technical issues from Gunnar, we might actually handle some of the questions that have come through. Thanks to everyone who's been using the chat feature to ask that. I'll start at the top here, and I have one from Michelle if you're still on the line. There's some interest in the difference between marine spatial planning and maritime spatial planning, and specifically,
right. So,
why are they not, well, why are they different? Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So I read that question, and I actually liked the answer of someone about maritime being on the surface, like regarding more transportation, cargo, that kind of more infrastructure type of uses. That's what's referred to generally with maritime, but it kind of depends on what part of the world. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, maritime spatial planning or marine spatial planning. So it's just another one of those terms that's used in different places in different ways. I don't think there's a huge difference. It might be, maybe more infrastructure emphasis or more sectoral emphasis on infrastructures. But to be honest, I don't really know.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Gunnar, how's it looking? I've passed presenter settings to you, and I'm going to unmute you if you wanted to try and speak.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because the signal I get here is that my microphone is muted. Do you see my presentation?
No, I do not. Would you be
Okay.
able to try sharing your screen again?
I had tried several times, and it says that it's working on it. But I've sent you my presentation, so you could
Yes.
show it.
I will load this up now.
If I could answer in the meantime regarding the marine protected areas and marine spatial planning.
Would you mind just holding tight on that, Michelle? I think we're ready to go with Guna's presentation.
Great.
Guna, please just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Yeah, just advance them now, please. Okay, I don't see them. Do the rest of the audience see them?
I can't see them either.
Okay.
Okay, here they are. Okay, this is just the title slide. Excuse me for having these initial problems, but I think most of you needed a little break, so I hope it will be a benefit after all. If you go to the next slide, please. Since this was supposed to be very brief, only 10 minutes, I have two main messages to convey. The first is a more general reflection on marine spatial planning. If that is conceived of only as a tool for allocating ocean space, we run the risk of it being too narrow for protecting the ecosystems. And I will reflect particularly on the relationship between ecosystem-based management and marine spatial planning. Then I was asked to say a few words about Norway as a case. And as regards Norway, in the oceans, ecosystem-based management is now institutionalized. Since 2002, this has become routine. However, we do not have a system for cross-sectoral marine spatial planning in the oceans. When we move into the coastal zone, it's different. There we have a rather strong system for cross-sectoral marine spatial planning, which is an extension of the land-based planning system. And that has traditions going back at least to 1965. However, ecosystem-based management is rather weak in the coastal zone in Norway. So these are my two main messages that I want to say a few more words about. Can you please change? First, in trying to understand what is ecosystem-based management, do you see the content of what seems to be the black bubbles only in my screen? Or are they black for the rest of you as well? Because the idea here is that the lower part here, the photos here, indicate different sections of an ecosystem. And what you have here on the top are different industrial sectors that have an impact on the ecosystem. So maybe the most fundamental when it comes to ecosystem-based management is that it is the whole ecosystem which is the management object. It's not a part of it like it is in, for instance, in fisheries. And what is important is that you address the impacts from all the different industrial sectors upon the whole ecosystem, taking the cumulative impacts into account, because that is the starting point for allocating responsibility for management measures to mitigate against undesired impacts. So this is a very broad way and simple way of trying to explain what is ecosystem-based management. If you use the page down, there are two comments underneath. Ecosystem-based management is a holistic framework around or above sectoral management. It's not a substitute. So for instance, in Norway, we have one policy layer, if you like, which is ecosystem-based management, and that is being implemented. It is a framework around all the different sectoral management systems that we have. Maybe more importantly is that this is multidisciplinary. It's multisectoral, and very often, or usually, it is also multi-level in its governance, meaning that it's very challenging. And that is also probably one of the reasons why ecosystem-based management has run into problems. We go to the next slides here. Ecosystem-based management was, I will almost say, the integrative approach to ocean management around year 2000. CBD, Conventional Biodiversity, had supported it enthusiastically in the 1990s. And at the Rio Plus 10 summit in Johannesburg, it was recommended to be applied in all ocean areas around the world. And the FAO also had its sectoral approach to fisheries, ecosystem-based approach to fisheries. Today, there is less talk about ecosystem-based ocean management. CBD seems to have abandoned it, more or less. They mostly now talk about marine protected areas. And you have a strong drive for blue growth, and marine spatial planning seems to be taking over as the kind of dominant tool for ocean management. So ecosystem-based ocean management seems to be driven on a sidetrack. Personally, I have studied it in Canada. Canada was reported to be a front runner in the 1990s and early 2000s, but they have abandoned it. So has Australia. The US never managed to make it fly at the federal level, at least. So Norway is quite exceptional by having it institutionalized, and also the EU coastal states are important in this context because they implement EU framework directive. The idea with this is to make a conceptual hierarchy of different approaches. And if you look at integrated ocean management as a way of integrating social, economic, and environmental issues, like the typical way to view sustainable development, you can say that ecosystem-based ocean management is a way of making, first of all, the environmental pillar of integrated ocean management operational. And then you can have, for instance, blue growth initiatives, like we find in so many countries these days. We just heard about South Africa. We have in Norway, in the EU countries, and so forth, which could be kind of realizing an economic pillar. Then for implementing ecosystem-based ocean management, you have a lot of different measures you can apply. Some of them are spatial, and for those, marine spatial planning can be important. But there are several others that are non-spatial. For instance, setting emission standards, setting fishing quotas, and so forth. So in order to have the breadth here, you must have both marine spatial planning and those other policy instruments in place. And within marine spatial planning, of course, you have a lot of different areas you can set aside. But now, particularly because of the political drive from the Convention on Biodiversity to set aside 10% of ocean space as the marine protected areas. This seems to dominate very strong at the moment, which is a risk. If you read what many social scientists report, I was in South Africa this year in March and read characteristics from South African social scientists about an approach they call to fence and fine. So small-scale fishers are basically being driven out, and you have huge problems with illegal fishing in the protected areas. The problem here with moving down the ladder is that the further down the ladder you move, it means that you make a simplification. And I'm very much concerned about the need for the ecosystem-based ocean management. Marine spatial planning can function excellent within an ecosystem-based ocean management framework, but alone there is a risk that it only becomes an instrument for making ocean space available, for instance, for aquaculture farms like in Norway, or ocean windmills, as we just heard examples from Germany, or whatever it might be, or new industries that drive marine spatial planning. Change, please. Then to Norway as an example. Norway has divided its ocean space into 3 management areas: the Barents Sea, the Norwegian Sea, and the North Sea and the Skagerrak. And their management plans have been made, particularly for the Barents Sea, where it started in 2002, and the first plan was presented in 2006. So this has now become routine, more or less, for our national government. Some characteristics of this system is that this is driven by political needs. There was a complete political stalemate in the early 2000s about the expansion northwards of the oil and gas industry in Norway, which is the most important when it comes to revenue and export income. There is absolutely no statutory basis for these plans. And that is interesting because there are many recommendations that we need to have a legal basis for these type of plans. In Norway, they function without. But the sectorial management that will implement these plans, they are legally based. So the plans are driven top-down from the government across all sectors. So all relevant ocean sectors are, so to say, commanded into an organizational structure where they collaborate on gathering data, on monitoring, on making strategic environmental assessments, and coming up with recommendations for plans, which they deliver to the central government. So there is a very strong knowledge component here, and several of my Norwegian colleagues have written with that perspective. But personally, I am in fact the first one who have dived more into the political side of this, and the way that disagreements have been solved are extremely important. Remember the political needs that drive this. This means that political disagreements have been lifted up to the absolute highest level where the cabinet solve conflicts. So, for instance, our Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg himself, way back in 2006, was instrumental in negotiating package deals about the Barents Sea for the first plan that was made. That is probably also one of the reasons why implementation has been successful. That has been the focus of my research, in which I have applied implementation theory, which I've hardly seen references to in ocean literature. When it comes to marine spatial planning, this system with the knowledge component has created a very important knowledge base for marine spatial planning. But there is no cross-sectorial system for such in place. The plans basically have provided a framework for the petroleum sector as such, but apart from that, linkages to other ocean sectors and their use of ocean space is weak. You go to the next slide. These are just the white papers that have been sent from the government to the parliament from the three first versions of the Barents Sea Management Plan. Go to the next, please. In the coastal zone, it's very different. We have a fragmented system here, where ecosystem-based management is trying to do that by to implement EU's water framework directive. However, and it's the counties that are responsible for the plans, and they collaborate through water body boards. However, it's the freshwater that gets most of the attention. So when we come out in the fjords, and not least if you see the baseline and baseline plus 1 nautical miles, which is where this planning, the area in which this planning should take place, these are huge areas into the ocean. And it seems that ocean space gets much less attention in these plans than the freshwater areas. When it comes to marine spatial planning, we have coastal zone plans. And as I've already said, they build on the Plan and Building Act, which was extended into the sea in the mid-1980s. So there is a long tradition. The reason basically was to find new areas for the growing aquaculture industry. So that has driven very much of Norwegian experience in coastal zone planning. Here the municipalities have the main role, and it seems that there is a very weak linkage to the water management plans, meaning that here you run the risk of having a type of activity which I warned against in the beginning as a way of allocating ocean space without having it nested into a system of ecological management. Most beneficial, ecosystem-based management. So I think that's what was my major messages. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Gunnar. Okay, and that concludes all the speakers for the first half of our session. We are running a little bit over time, so I think we will actually pass on the Q&A session that we were going to have with our speakers, but instead we're going to put all our questions on the Hoover app and be able to kind of have a conversation online there. For now, let's have a quick break and we'll come back at 1/2 the hour, wherever you are in your time zone. That's roughly 12 minutes from now, and we will get working after the break on the Marine Spatial Plan simulation and game.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. My name is Natasha Vaidiano, and I am part of IMECA network. I'm working as associate professor in Romania with interest in MSP. I'm very excited to have Harald Wormeling and Jeroen Steenbeck on to talk about the MSP challenge and the multi-layer simulation game. Also, I'm very glad to have you and that you were able to join the workshop during this difficult time. This session will provide a brief overview of MSP challenge development over the years and a demonstration of the simulation game. The MSP challenge uses game technology and the role play to support communication and learning for MSP. I just want to can you see the content of the slide? And this is actually the agenda.
It just dropped off, Natasha. We can't yet see it. Oh, it's back now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll split the session in three parts, actually. First of all, Harald will present the actually an intro to MSP game. After that, we'll have Jeroen with a presentation on MSP game and EcoPath with EcoSim. And after this presentation, we'll have an MSP game demo, and it lasts about 30 minutes. In the end, we will have a closing remarks session and Q&A session also. So I hope you will enjoy the session. And before we get started, I just wanted to encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. And you can use also the Hova app or the chat on WebEx. Okay, now I will turn to Harald and I will just introduce him. Harald is a senior research project leader at Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and he works on the design, use, and evaluation of serious games for policy analysis, decision making, and he manages the research and development of the MSP challenge simulation platform. So Harald, if you can.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me, Natasha?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Natasha. Shall I?
Welcome. Yes,
okay.
Please.
Let me just share my screen. Of course, need to find the button. And then let's see. Oh, this is always a little confusing for me. Oh, this one. Yes. Okay, I'm taking over, Natasha. I hope you can see something. Is this true?
Yes, we're.
Okay, brilliant. I have a little video somewhere at some point. I remember I need to change a setting. Well, never mind. We'll see how it goes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the introduction, Natasha. I'll be providing a brief introduction to the MSP Challenge simulation platform before I hand it over to Jeroen Steenbeek. Meanwhile, I'm here in the Netherlands where a thunderstorm is coming over, so you might have some additional entertainment value with the thunder in the background. I'm not sure. Do enjoy it. All right. Let's talk about the MSP Challenge. As I do, I know many of you have tried, and some of you have succeeded to download and install it from the website, mspchallenge.info. There are some issues here and there because you need to create an account, and sometimes when you create an account with a Gmail address, Gmail is very, 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 very strict when it comes to sending emails, so it sometimes blocks the email you need to receive to verify your account. So that's an issue some of you have been experiencing. Do let me know. It doesn't have to be during this presentation. It can be afterwards. You can always send me an email to solve these kinds of issues. And of course, many of you are using a Mac, as so rightly pointed out in the chat and in the Q&A. We don't unfortunately support Mac just yet, but we are planning to in the near future. So for all you Windows 10 users out there that have been able to create an account, wonderful, well done, thank you. And please do get it installed, get it all ready, because for the demo in roughly 25 minutes, you'll be able to join in. And you'll be able to join in by connecting to our North Sea demo server, which is shown on this screen now. So under the demo tab, when you open up the software, you'll have the top button, North Sea demo. You can click on the connect button there and just join as any country color. You'll see a list of colors you can choose from, red, orange, etc. Just choose the color. It doesn't really matter at this point. And then, yeah, you'll be able to log on already. Now, a little bit about MSP Challenge simulation platform. A little bit of background there. It's a game-based platform, as Natasha already managed, for collaborative learning, for real-world integrated ecosystem-based maritime spatial planning. Basically, we've tried to use state-of-the-art multiplayer game technology here, in which we integrated real geographical data from geographical information systems and connected that to the EcoPath with ecosystem simulator, as well as a shipping and an energy simulator in the background to offer you an experience whereby you can review all the data from the geographical information systems in a real sea basin and then make some spatial plans and see how these simulators respond to them. We also are working on a 3D virtual reality module prototype. I can't show you that, unfortunately, just yet. It's work in progress. And we already offer also some scenario options in here so that people or a facilitator of a game session can set some player goals and also control time, because this is a simulation after all. So it's time-based as well as spatially based. There's role-play enhancements in there, so or you can actually add role-play enhancements to it in your session. In short, it's quite expandable, quite adaptable platform. Of course, it's nicer to just show a little video and to give a demo. So I'll have a quick video, a short trailer. I hope it works. Natasha, please interject, jump in and scream. People aren't hearing anything. I think it should work, but we'll see. So I'm clicking next, and please do let us know, Natasha, if you can't hear anything. Okay. Give me a second. Okay, no sound. Then I'll just skip this, or I'll just talk over it. Why not? So what you're seeing here is just some images from different sessions that we've held with this game, and you're seeing some features as well, of course. So basically what you can do with the software is you can draw up spatial plans and actually have in different maps, different heat maps also, have the consequences simulated. Now, as you can see, we have multiple editions also for the Baltic Sea, for example, which you just saw a screenshot. And yeah, here's just a little tidbit of how you draw it up, but I'll give you a proper demo after Jeroen's presentation. This is a little tidbit from the virtual reality module we're developing. And well, basically what we want to achieve with this platform, of course, is that people can learn all about maritime spatial planning by doing it, trying it out in a playful manner, whereby they actually learn about the complexity of maritime spatial planning and basically lots of things that have been talked about in this morning already during the other presentations. In time, we would love it to be involved in further developments to actually integrate this into actual maritime spatial planning processes, so that the authorities around different sea basins of the different countries actually can use this in their process itself a bit more formally. It's evolved over the years. This hasn't come quickly or easily, the simulation platform. We started already in 2011 when two gentlemen, Lodewijk Abspoel and Xander Keizer from the Dutch government, approached my professor, Professor Igor Meyer, for whom I work still at Breda University, with the question of, well, there's this high-level stakeholder meeting coming up in Lisbon, Portugal. And yeah, it would be good to develop some kind of interactive session, maybe a simulation game. And in just a couple of months' time, they developed a simulation game, a first version of MSP Challenge. Quite successful. And over the years, as this slide shows, the developments continued. So the first version of a North Sea edition of MSP Challenge, or a North Sea MSP Challenge, was developed already in 2013, and then only years later did we decide, or actually Igor, Xander, and Lodewijk decide to also develop a board game, which is now all over the world, basically part of a big project called MSP Global. And another level up from that, already initiated towards the end of 2015, was the development of the current simulation platform, where we looked at what we had experienced over those past years with the digital games and the board game, actually, and decided to basically start from scratch again in terms of software and yeah, develop a much more flexible platform that can connect to or that can actually accommodate different sea basins, any data layer, and also different simulations running in the background. So there you have it. We now have 3 editions set up on this simulation platform: a North Sea edition, which I'll demo later, a Baltic Sea edition, and a Clyde Marine Region edition, which is a very small area in the northwest of Scotland. We're currently also developing an Adriatic Sea edition. So, what have we done with it? Apologies for the fuzziness of this photo, but I thought it prudent to blur it for privacy reasons. This is a photo of one of the sessions we did in Aberdeen, Scotland, in 2018. Our very first session with the new simulation platform was in January 2018. Even though it's still in development, we're applying it left and right, and you can play with it and use it yourself already as well, even though we're still developing it. We've had about 25 sessions. I'm hopeful that I've included every session we did in there, but at some point you do run the risk of losing track. We've had, most certainly more than 350 participants play this. So typically we're talking about 10 to 15 people per session. Mostly in the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, but we've been in many different countries, mostly around Europe, as part of the different projects that helped develop and apply the platform. So yeah, I'll give a demo later. So now you know a little bit about where it came from, what the essence is. Oh yes, I would love to come to Africa, of course. Let's see, what do I want to say? Oh yeah, of course, this is public money, public funding has gone into it. So we decided very early on, all the different money streams have gone into it. We decided that it should be free and open source. MSPchallenge.info is the main website for it. You can try it yourself using our online demo servers now and forever. They're always online. I make sure of that. And later this year, we'll release the entire platform and its source code once we're ready for that. Once we've figured out some of the more technical issues that still need figuring out. I'll give a demo after Jeroen's presentation, and I'll walk you through how to review different data layers in the software, how to draw up spatial plans. I'll give an example of a wind farm in the North Sea, and we'll review how the simulations respond to that. And about that simulation phase, that's where Jeroen Steenbeek comes in. So I think it's high time we brought him in, and I thank you for now. Natasha, is Jeroen online?
Thank you so much, Harald. That was a great intro.
Okay.
And now I will invite Jeroen to give the presentation. So Jeroen Steenbeek is a system analyst and the core programmer of the EcoPath with EcoSim food web modeling approach. The main research interest is solving ecosystem modeling challenges using computing, GIS, and serious gaming. Can you hear me, Jeroen? Hi, Jeroen, can you hear me? Can you share the content?
Let's hope and see if he's actually there. Huh?
Yes. I've seen him, but
yeah.
Natasha, it looks like he may have actually dropped off.
He's not in the list, is he? No. Looks like
he was here.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I saw him too.
Okay.
Let's see. He did mention this morning to me that he has a bad internet connection. I certainly hope it's temporary.
Yes. But Steph, you have the presentation, no?
Yes, I do have the slides, but I was relying on him having an audio connection to be able to progress those slides.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a couple of users who are calling in on a mobile phone.
We can continue with Harald, and we can have the presentation of Jeroen after that. Maybe it works like this if he is not able to join us now. I don't know how to.
Fine by me, whatever you prefer.
Yes, let's do that, and I'll reach out to while you're speaking.
Okay, great. You can continue, Harald. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So I'll share it again. I hope everything went okay, besides the video, of course, but at least I could talk over it. No more videos, I promise. Okay. Let's see. Where am I? Where's this? Ah, there it is. Okay. Demo of the North Sea edition. Okay. I'll open it up. If you're able to run MSP Challenge, you'll first get that login screen that I showed you, and you can select under the demo tab the North Sea demo server and log on as any country color. Once you do, you'll see this. You'll be logged on to the North Sea. And I'll walk you through it, the main features, and I'll demonstrate how to draw up a wind farm, as I mentioned. and then I'll just go back to some slides to quickly show you how the simulation would have responded. I'll explain why I do that. It's in the interest of time, obviously. Now, so what you're seeing here is the client. This is a client-server application. So this means if other people also run MSP Challenge and log on to that North Sea demo server, then they'll be logged on to that same server. We'll all be logged on to the same North Sea, which means that we can all draw in the same sea and actually see what how the sea, the simulations, of course, responds to that. So I do encourage everyone who was able to install it to go ahead and just start it up, click on demo, go to the North Sea online demo, choose a country color, can be any of the colors. As you can see here, we've got England as red, we've got Scotland as green, we've got Norway as purple, we've got Denmark as blue, Germany is slightly harder to see, but it's yellow. And of course, the Netherlands is orange. This is logical to me, but maybe not to you. We have Belgium here in pink, and we have a little slither of France here in brown. So choose any of those colors, enter a username, and you'll log on to the same North Sea. Okay, now, first thing I need to explain is that you can hover over the map by clicking on the right mouse button and holding it and just dragging your mouse. And you can zoom in and out with the scroll wheel if you have it. If you don't, then you can use these buttons if you don't have a scroll wheel to zoom in and zoom out. So these are in the bottom right corner over here. Right, so scrolling in and out to zoom and going over the map like so. That's first step. Second step is, we've got lots of layers up here on the top left corner. We've got lots of buttons here. So yeah, let's have a look at all these data layers that we've got in here. So just go ahead and click with me if you've got it running. We've got lots of data layers here also on the territorial water lines, for instance, maybe some military areas. We've got some environmental conditions here about wind speed, for instance. This is a raster layer, as you can see. I'll just deactivate that again. Notice that the active layers window on the top right corner here is filling up as I activate more layers. So sediments, also interesting, of course, different sediments we've got in here. Let's see, fossil fuel availability, sand and gravel availability, lots of data layers. Now, of course, at some point you'll be wondering, what does it all mean? Can I have a legend? Meanwhile, it's starting to rain a lot over here. I hope I should close my window. It's a bit stormy over here. So if you're wondering about the legend, you can use that active layers window in the top right here. So for instance, for sand and gravel availability, I can expand that. Okay, this is all the same. It's all sand and gravel. But for military areas, we've got some types here. So we've got some fly zones and some ammunition dumps, small ones over here. Sad but true. Of course, they're no longer in use, but they have been in use in the past. But of course, we've got some other stuff as well. Let's look at wind farms. So we've got some wind farms. I'll just deactivate the military areas. So we've got quite some wind farms here. Also, wind farms areas of search. Interesting data there. These are search areas, as is explained. So these are not developed yet, but are considered in different ways, considered either for complete development. Typically, these ones are considered for complete development, or this one for partial development, or in development in chunks. So lots of data about wind farms there. We've also got some nice, let's go to the cables, nice layers here on energy cables and telecom cables as well. Look at all those telecom cables, lots and lots of them. And we've also got nice data layers here on oil and gas installations. Of course, something the North Sea is quite famous for. That's the edge of the North Sea there. Lots and lots of oil and gas installations. Now everything is clickable, of course. To get a bit more information, I should have mentioned that earlier. So I can click on this wind farm and see this is Hornsea Project 1, apparently, according to our data sources. I can click on any of these. So here we have K10V oil platform or gas platform. It's probably, yeah, it seems to be decommissioned. So we've got also, yeah, this is an interesting area in Norway. Here's the Ekofisk area, very important area for Norway. So we've got lots and lots of different data layers. Okay, now more stuff going on. Shipping lanes, IMO routes, so the International Maritime Organization's routes for shipping, typically designated for safety reasons, obviously, in international waters. And at this point, I think I'll discuss a little bit the different simulations and all the data they generate, because what I've shown you now so far are static data layers, but we've also got some simulated dynamic data layers. For example, on shipping, this is the shipping intensity layer, which is a heat map. So the darker or the more red, I should say, the more intensive shipping intensity, more higher the shipping intensity in that area. This is not highly realistic simulated data. So we have a shipping simulation running in the background that looks at the shipping infrastructure in terms of routes, and also things that are in the way of shipping, like wind farms, ships don't go through, and tries to generate paths for all the ships that want to go from a certain port to another port. So we've got lots of input data in there in terms of the ships that want to go from, for instance, the port of Rotterdam out of the North Sea through the English Channel, or from the port of Hamburg, of course, or from any port, a number of ships that want to go out or through the North Sea to another port or out of the North Sea per month. And based on that, our simulation generates routes. Again, it's not highly accurate. That's because it's incredibly hard to create very accurate simulated routes. But at least by having this, we have something that responds to players' actions, which I'll get to in a moment. Okay, so that's about the shipping simulation. The other simulation running in the background is on energy. It's an energy simulation. So I'll just activate the energy cables also, and with the wind farms, and zoom in on these wind farms. Now what you're seeing now is lots of data, lots of numbers here about these wind farms. And these numbers are generated by our energy simulation. So basically we have a simple model for each wind farm area. A simple rule of thumb, I'd rather call it. For every square kilometer, the average production capacity of that wind farm is 6 megawatts. So we have a production capacity here for this wind farm of 715.3 megawatts. Now the question, of course, is do you have enough infrastructure to get that production capacity to your grid? And this is where the energy simulation comes in. So as a maritime spatial planner, you have to, or in this game at least, you have to have enough infrastructure area available to make sure you get all that energy on the grid, and that translates into actual cables. See lots of cables here, each with a capacity of 460 megawatts. So what you're seeing is actually two figures there for each asset in this simulation, like a cable or the wind farm, whereby the last figure represents the capacity of that asset and the first figure represents how much of it is actually used. So in this case, I'm hovering over a cable with a capacity of 460 megawatts, and 255 of it is actually used. So that's calculated by our energy simulation. So that way we can actually see, okay, is the infrastructure sufficient to get all that on the grid? Well, in this case it is, because this wind farm is showing as 715 capacity in megawatts, and actually 750 megawatts. All of it is actually being used, so it's getting onto the national grid. So yay, our energy simulation has confirmed here that it's reached the shore. And by shore, I should actually show you that. It's a landing station. Also has a capacity, 10 gigawatts, 2.45 of which is used, which of course is the addition of these 3 wind farms together, connected through all these cables. So that took slightly more time to explain than I intended, but this is the energy simulation. Finally, of course, and I think most of you are interested in that, what is this EcoPath with EcoSim simulation running in the background? I continue to hope that Jeroen is still available or will come back. So until I hear otherwise, I'll just keep it brief and hope that Jeroen can explain more. But basically, the way it works, every human activity, well, not every, but in this simulation, lots of human activities, of course, generate pressures. What better way to represent a pressure than with a nice footprint icon? So here we have a category layer for these pressures that we have. I should add that fishing is also a pressure, so I'll show you that in a minute. But these are the 4 key pressures that we've been able to put into the system: noise, artificial substrate, bottom disturbance, and surface disturbance. So let's just activate noise. Again, you see heat maps. This is a heat map. This is a raster-based heat map. Again, as you can see, accuracy is still something we need to work on. This is a low resolution 10 by 10 kilometer raster. So it's not the highest resolution that you would like, but on a sea basin level of this scale, we still think it's quite useful, especially taking into consider that, yeah, it does actually generate the pressures quite nicely, this system, because as you might have guessed, all these blobs over here are, of course, again, are lovely, no, I should click on the right button, oil and gas installations, or not so lovely oil and gas installations. So there you have pressure of noise generated by all these oil and gas installations. Now, and we have that also for artificial substrates, basically generated by pipelines mostly, and energy cables and telecom cables. Bottom disturbance, especially during construction, of course. Surface disturbance, well, that goes without saying, I guess. So here we have these pressures, and these pressures are then fed into the ecosystem simulation, into the EcoPath with EcoSim model. This is a nice system because if we can model a certain human activity into these or additional pressures, then that can be then picked up by the EcoPath with EcoSim model. And then the EcoPath with EcoSim model takes all these pressures into account, given the food web that exists and all the species that have different characteristics responding to these pressures. And that then, per month, we run these simulations per month. The heat maps of the species might actually also change because of all that. So let's have a look at some of these species. So here's cod, for example. Now you notice all these blue spots here again. So this is an example of how EcoPath with EcoSim has suggested that, yeah, because of these pressures going on, clearly related there to the oil and gas installations, there's less cod in this area. And that might also have a further impact, of course, because there's a food web going on, after all. So here we have demersal fish as well, flatfish, which is, of course, a very different kind of distribution. Again, this is, of course, a heat map, in case that wasn't clear. So green is, the more red, the higher the density. So here we have that nice legend there. And yeah, these are just some of the species that are in the EcoPath with EcoSim model: mackerel, herring, sand eel as well. But yeah, of course, the EcoPath with the EcoSim model contains many more species. The trick here, of course, was, well, what do we show? Because there's already a data overload in this simulation. So yeah, we chose these 6 to show, as of course they represent also a key species for fishing, which I'll get to now with these 3 fishing fleets that we've put in here as well. So again, it's a bit crude in terms of the resolution, 10 by 10 kilometers, remember, and this is also generated by EcoPath with EcoSim. This is the bottom trawl catch fleet. This is the drift and fixed nets catch fleet. Sorry, the drift and fixed nets fleet. And this is the catch of that fleet. Again, heat map. And here we have the industrial and pelagic trawl. Now, of course, you notice quite some areas where they can't fish. Many of these, or actually all of those areas where they don't fish, are defined by the game itself. So you can define marine protected areas in which you designate that area as something where there can't be fished. At the start of the game, we never have any of these areas clearly defined as there's no fishing at all in there, because we simply don't know whether all these areas disallow fishing categorically or not. This is something that's still an issue we're looking into. But as a player, you can. Speaking of which, I think it's high time to actually show you how you do that. I do notice some players are able to draw up some plans already, so that's nice. So if you click on the big plus in the top left corner there, you'll open up a plan wizard. This is the start of drawing up your own spatial plans. So I'll just get this started by creating a wind farm plan. So I have to give it a name. I named it wind farm, and I will select the layers I need for this wind farm plan. So I need the wind farm. Energy cables, yes, that's automatically added, because what is a wind farm without cables? It's absolutely nothing. I'm adding the landing stations there as well, because I need to connect that cable to a landing station from the wind farm. And yeah, you know what? I'll just add oil and gas installations in there too. Excellent. I'm noticing at least one other person following along. Excellent. Keep it going. Wind farm plan by a player logged in as blue. And I do also see some nice plans developing on aquaculture and shipping regulations for country yellow. Keep it up. Okay, now what I need to point out at this point is that, of course, this is a time-based simulation. You might have noticed in the top there, we are in April 2037 in the simulation, right? So we need to, and the simulation is running, right? The clock is ticking. There you go, it's now May. So every couple of minutes, another month, how do you say that? Well, it's another month has gone. So I do need to select here a proper date by which I want my plan implemented, because wind farms, apparently they have a 36-month construction time. So I do need to plan ahead, because otherwise I might be too slow. And this plan will take time to complete after all. So I'm going to select 2042. Now, there it is. My plans monitor pops up, and it shows my plan in design state with the layers that I activated. I can move this out of the way for now. I'm logged in now as country red, hence all the interface elements are red. So that's England. So I'm going to zoom in over here. You might have noticed this area here is sort of, it's part of this bigger area. It's called the Dogger Bank, in case you're not familiar. The Dogger Bank is a sandbank in the middle of the North Sea. And if you click in the area there, you'll see the bathymetry indicates that it's very shallow waters. It's ideal for wind farms. So it's very popular for wind farm consideration. The problem is, of course, that it's quite far away from shorelines for many countries, although over here we're getting quite close to, reasonably close to England, which is why there have been already plans there for wind farms. I've clicked the edit button, and now I can select with which of these layers I want to draw. I'm clicking on wind farms to select that to draw with, and I have some controls down here to either edit existing data or create new data. So I'm just going to create new data here. Incidentally, there are already plans for wind farms here and these areas of search. There you go. I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to do something crazy because it's a simulation game, and that just allows me to do anything. So I'm just clicking, just click once to place a point. No need to hold it. And just keep clicking to place more points, and then you'll see, hey, a shape is forming. So I'm just clicking once and then moving my mouse over to a certain other area. I'm sticking to England, so I don't need to bother any other country with permission or something. No, I'm going to do what I want, even though it might not be good to do. And when you're ready, you're done with your shape, you can double click it to finish it, right? Now, this is a huge wind farm area. If I zoom in, it'll show that the simulation is calculated. This would have a production capacity of 71 gigawatts. Now, this is not realistic to develop in one go, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. This would require, of course, multiple landing stations and a huge amount of cables to get everything, the whole production capacity on land. But, well, let's see, let's leave that. Just create one landing station. So I'm clicking on landing station, clicking on the highest capacity option that I have here on the layer types, and clicking on create again. And this is just a point, so I just need to click once. There I'll have my landing station set up with 10 gigawatt capacity. I can click on the energy cable now and select the highest option I have there, which is nowhere near enough, 460 megawatts. But I do have the option to specify the number of cables. So I'll just first create that cable. Now what you have to do is you have to select the center of your wind farm and then go from there. Again, you can click multiple times to draw the line that you want to draw, as long as you end up at the landing station. Now I should be able to specify, if I edit, yeah, the number of cables. So let's put that on, well, 20 cables for now. So this represents 20 cables all close together, or one cable bundle. Regardless of how realistic that is at this point, of course, it's not relevant right now for this demo. So I can click on accept to see, you know, can I move on with this? I can't, because I have some issues here under the issue tab. So this is the plans monitor, that same window we saw earlier when I first went to the plan wizard. You can extend and minimize it with this icon. And there's some issues there, because apparently, there's some shipping routes in the way and oil and gas installations. So we can view that. Oh, there they are. So now I can actually try to mitigate that, try to do something about that. And of course, this is where, well, a big part of maritime spatial planning comes in. You know, how do we deal with conflicts like these? What do we do? Do we decommission the oil and gas rigs in this instance, or do we diminish the wind farm, or do we do something else entirely? Well, I'll see what I can do by just doing this. There you go, issues resolved. Apparently, there's no more shipping lane in the way. Yeah, there was a shipping lane here under the national shipping lanes. So I got rid of that as well. So now I can actually say, okay, let's approve that. And by doing so, I'm making it available for other players as well. So the people who've logged in, as I see, country yellow and blue and green, they will now be able to see my wind farm, the red wind farm plan, under approved in the plans monitor. And the button for that is up here if you haven't got it open. So you can also see it now. And this means that as time progresses, it's approved. So, right? So as time progresses, as we approach the construction time for this 2041, then this will be implemented and you'll see it come up on the actual map. So that means if I get out of this view now, the view of my plan, it'll disappear because it's October 2037. So there's nothing there yet. So there you have it. Is it nice? Is it possible for me to show some of the things that people have drawn up themselves? Yes, I can. So I'll just take the liberty here of, I see Hauke Kegler has drawn up some aquaculture. I'll open that plan up for consultation on your behalf so that I can show it to everyone. Here it is. I can click on changes to quickly see what he did. Or sorry, he or she, I'm not familiar with Hauke, I'm so sorry about that. But here we have aquaculture. Aquaculture in what looks to me like the German EEZ. So that's nice, you were able to draw that up. Thank you for that. Thank you for your engagement. Wonderful stuff. And yeah, I see other people still hard at work. So feel free to open your plan up for consultation if you want. Then I can also see it and show it to everyone else. But I think I'm actually running out of time. I think my half hour is almost up. Am I right, Natasha?
Yeah. No.
I'll
Okay.
quickly then show what the simulations might have done with my wind farm. Is that okay? Is Jeroen still not available?
No, he's here.
No? He is here.
I'm here, oh yes.
You're here. Wonderful. Okay, I'll quickly show how the different simulation might have responded to this example plan. So here you have the shipping simulation responding. So here's a before picture, the starting position in terms of shipping intensity in the North Sea. And here's the after of the wind farm implementation. Notice this big red line in the middle from England. That represents maintenance traffic to that big wind farm we built. Of course, here's the before situation of noise, and here's the after, huge noise area created there, not just because of the wind farm, but because of also the maintenance shipping, again, going to and from that wind farm. So that also creates noise. Artificial substrate is also created. Notice the big difference there, before and after. What's also interesting here, of course, is that fishing is no longer allowed in that area. Boom, there's a huge gap there in the industrial and pelagic trawl catch because they can't fish in that wind farm area anymore. But you might also, it's a bit hard to see, but you might notice that they then go to other areas as well, right? Because the quota is unchanged, or the efforts are unchanged. I should stop saying quota, right? The efforts are unchanged. So here's herring diminishing in the area, as you can see there. And that's all I wanted to see. So I'll shut up now and let Jeroen explain a bit more about how the EcoPath with EcoSim simulation works. Do remember that you can try it all out yourself on the online demo server, as some of you at least were able to. And do please feel free to get in touch with me if you're having problems. I'm here to help you solve them, bearing in mind that we are still in development. So please be a bit patient with us while we sort out problems that we didn't realize existed. And I thank you. And over to Jeroen.
Thank you very much. Hi, Jeroen.
Hi, very good. Hey, sorry for ruining your program. My internet decided to evaporate on a very inconvenient moment. But I'm already here when Harold lets me share the screen.
Yeah, everything is okay. I just want to introduce you.
Beautiful.
Jeroen is a system analyst and a core programmer of the EcoPath with EcoSim food web modeling approach. And the main research interest is solving ecosystem modeling challenges using computing, GIS, and serious gaming like MSP challenge game. So, Jeroen, please.
Fantastic. I think something is coming. I'm trying to share. Do you see something?
Yes, we are waiting.
Oh, do you see my screen or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, now it's working.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. Well, it's maybe not so bad that we actually switched the presentations around, because now you've seen already what I'm going to present looks like. So we basically we started doing this work because very few decision support tools for maritime spatial planning can actually forecast what the impacts are going to be from the planning decisions built by the DST. So, yeah, what does the future mean for your plans that you have in stock, right? Because any development will change the ecosystem. So if you optimize for a current situation, the moment you make a development, the situation has already changed, and especially if you start adding climate change and other things to the mix, your future will look very different. And so that was the rationale for bringing in EcoPath with EcoSim in the MSP tool. We wanted to include the ecosystem responses to spatial plans as an extra planning consideration for game players, and so we wanted to make sure that the MSP challenge was connected to a robust and representative ecosystem that included all the components needed to maintain a robust and resilient ecosystem. So you include all species that are relevant for ecology, but you might also, based on the MSP challenge gameplay demands, want to include certain iconic species that people love or like, or that are very of high commercial interest. using the best available science. And something that Harold already alluded to, this also needed to run as fast as possible, which is of course a very conflicting requirement. I mean, you want to include as much as you can, but also as little as you can. So in the end, we ended settling for EcoPath with EcoSim for several reasons. It was coded in the same language as the MSP software, and it was an open source model that was already highly used for connecting to other tools. Let me give you a brief explanation of what the EcoPath with EcoSim is. It is an ecological food web model that tracks the paths of energy through a complete food web. We present food webs through functional groups, and a functional group is basically a group of species that have a similar role in the ecosystem. And for those of you familiar with ecology, it ranges from trophic level 1 to as high as possible, where trophic level 1 is the phytoplankton and everything else that eats the phytoplankton. And further on, it's like phytoplankton, zooplankton, small fish, larger fish. We have the marine mammals, we have seabirds, etc. in the model. EcoPath includes the impacts of fishing and environmental change. And the cute thing about EcoPath, which also applies to the MSP software, is that we have a series of generic equations that can be adjusted, parameterized, to represent any ecosystem in the world. So different ecosystems have different species, but the EcoPath approach allows you to configure that with quite ease. And EcoPath is open source and freely available. I invite you to check out the EcoPath website there. It's been around for a while. We have about more than 1,000 peer-reviewed publications now. The software recently celebrated its 35th year of existence, and a high user base. And EcoPath is also increasingly applied now, not alone in research, but also in policy management and even in environmental impact analyses. EcoPath is basically a three-stage approach. You start off by building an EcoPath model, a static mass balance model, where you define the snapshot of an ecosystem. You do this picture that you see here on the left on the top that reflects a food web diagram, where at the bottom you see the trophic level 1, the phytoplankton, and then everything else that eats everything else on top.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jerome, but I can't see your slides advancing.
I'm looking. Yeah, that could be my internet connectivity. I'm looking at. Okay, I'm sharing the PowerPoint presentation. And we're having problems connecting to the network. Oh God. Do you still hear me, or am I as well?
Yes, I can hear you. Natasha, would you like me to share the presentation
if you
on
can,
my end?
why don't you do that? Yeah, why don't you take over? That's good.
Okay, 1 moment.
Yeah. Internet is a bit shaky here, as you already figured out. I'll stop sharing. Just still hear me.
Yes. So now we can see your steps. Which slide do you need, Jerome?
I need the one that's, this. Perfect. Good.
Was it this one?
Two more actually. Yeah, this one. Yeah. I don't know for sure what you've missed, but anyway, let's go for this one. So, in summary, EcoPath is a three-stage approach. First, in EcoPath, define what the ecosystem looks like, who lives where, who eats what, how things rely on each other, and also you include fishing. Then you go for EcoSim, which starts applying the static mass balance model over time. And if you can replicate past trends by fitting your model to time series and doing other wizardry, you can start playing possible future simulations. You can explore the effectiveness of fishing policies or things like that. If you are fine with your temporal dynamics, you can move up to EcoSpace, the spatial temporal dynamics, where you basically where your questions suddenly get spatial. You start worrying about if in certain locations are even better than others. You can start exploring the distribution of species and fishing effort. You can really check if local management options are efficient. And EcoSpace, the space combines the environmental change, in fishing, onto a complete ecosystem over time and space. It's quite a complex model. Next slide, please. Can you advance to the next slide, please?
The sound is not
I
very
don't
good.
see it here yet. No way. No, I'm so sorry. I don't see the next slide yet.
There might be a delay on your end. I'm currently on slide 6,
Right,
titled
okay.
Connecting MSP and
Okay,
EWE.
nice. Right, okay. Yeah. So what did we do to connect the MSP and EcoPath? We, as Harold explained to you, the MSP game is basically a two-stage approach. First, you plan your plans, and then we enter a simulation phase. And during the simulation phase, plans are gradually put into action. That disturbs the environment. At every time step, the MSP software then calculates the combined impacts of those spatial plans and sends those EcoPath, which incorporates it into its calculations to affect the distribution of species and fisheries. And EcoPath then sends ecological indicators in terms of biomass catches and even some commonly accepted ecological indicators back for MSP for further dissemination and for players to plan against. Next slide, please. Cool. So as Harold already said, we kept things reasonably simple because this was a first experiment in connecting a scientific model to a planning engine. This was never done before, and we were not really sure how this was going to pan out in terms of performance. So we kept things deliberately simple. We define 5 different pressures. We, for instance, have noise, which is the presence of low frequency noises. So we only capture low frequency hum here and our loud noises. But the effect is that it makes cells less suitable for sensitive species. Note here the word sensitive. It is not, noise is not uniformly applied to all species. We know that some species respond very differently to noise than others. So you can quantify that in the EcoPath approach. It's just that the MSP software delivers noise to EcoPath, and in EcoPath we take that on. Similarly, we have surface and bottom disturbance. That is just basic disturbance as captured as generic reduced visibility, pollution, busyness of just activities. Again, this has the similar impact on the ecosystem model that it makes cells less suitable for sensitive species. And some activities create artificial substrate. The presence of man-made structures that might provide habitat like nursery grounds, substrate to latch onto, shelter from predation, etc. for benefiting species. And then we have protection, which is basically de facto absence of shipping because of structures, areas where you simply cannot bring your boat into. And in the model, we make certain specific fleets not being able to enter those areas, as Harold already demonstrated. This, in the initial phase, is quite simple, but it serves the job to cause the biggest triggers in the food web by displacing the most iconic or most important species. And then the whole system of cascading food web effects takes over. Can you move to the next slide, please? Beautiful. This gives you a bit of an idea how we convey the information from the MSP game to EcoPath. In MSP, as Harold showed you, you draw your activities as points, lines, and polygons. But the ecospace grid underneath works on, in the case of the North Sea, on a 10 by 10 grid cell. And we just quantify how much noise, in this case, ends up in every cell, which is what the ecosystem responds to. Next slide, please. In EcoPath itself, there are a few mechanisms I won't dive into deep. There's at the bottom of every slide papers that provide more details about the things I'm talking about. But basically, the big idea behind ecospace is that every animal moves to some degree. Some moves much faster than others, obviously. And animals prefer better locations, which better is defined as the trade-off between the ability to eat and the risk of being eaten up. So, but that again is then captured as the risk to eat depends on how suitable a cell for you is, and cell suitability is a sum of the affinity for local habitats. Some species are very bound to certain kinds of substrate. Benthic species that live on the bottom really like certain types of bottom structures, while others don't care. So some species have very strong preferences for habitat substrate types. Others have very strong tolerances to environmental conditions such as noise or disturbance, or maybe even temperature shifts, etc., or salinity or oxygen or pH. So you can configure that. And then, of course, the big one is also that, species like to be in places where there's a lot of available prey and not too many predators. You'll see fish end up in spaces where there's probably less to eat, but at least there's no predators. Those kind of things are very normal. And then the last part is that we have also a fishing effort into the model, that you feed the ecospace the total amount of effort you want to distribute, and then the effort will concentrate on where the biggest bang for your bucks is, the areas where you can fish, where there's no habitat limitations and there's no fishing limitations, and where the presence of valuable prey species is high. So those dynamics play out, and in between, of course, species move around, species eat each other, species try to avoid each other. There's lots of interplay in the ecospace model. But with these handles, the presence of habitat, we connected that to the artificial substrate, and we used environmental drivers, noise, surface and bottom disturbance to scare away things, and we used then the protection layer to affect the fishing effort. Next slide, please. So this is a bit how it plays out internally in the model. This is a pure hypothetical situation where we just create shipping in the Firth of Clyde. The Firth of Clyde creates noise and surface disturbance. And cetaceans, the whales, are sensitive to that. When show some response in avoiding the areas. You already showed, Harold already showed in the MSP game how that plays out on the larger scale. Next slide, please. Another cool feature that we have in MSP is that some spatial plants even have a lifespan and they evolve. For instance, if you place a wind park, in the beginning, you're going to have a construction phase of, say, 2 years. We have a lot of based on pylon driving. You have a lot of disturbance from all the construction happening. And of course, there's protection. The area is fully prohibited from fishing to occur. And after 2 years, the system switches over. It switches over to far less noise. It's mostly rotor hum that we're having, and there's going to be quite an amount of artificial substrate, and there's of course the protection stays in place. So this also creates another set of dynamics to the development of certain spatial plans. Next slide, please. So in summary, what we build is it's basically the first decision support tool that can include the short and long-term impacts of planning decisions onto an ecosystem with some level of plausibility within the simplification constraints that we put in place. The first case studies were deliberately kept simple to satisfy our simulation runtimes. But there's so much more we can do, and we also realize that the simulation runs so fast that we probably will be doing much more later on. And we think this unity of these two tools offers significant potential for MSP, but also for ecosystem-based management of fisheries and ecosystem-based management. And we think that these kind of the ideas that we put in place here can be applied to other tools of similar scope. And well, here's a piece of feedback from a participant in the Firth of Clyde sessions. He really liked it. It was very nice. It was promising. So next slide, please. Yeah, and there's of course lots of things we can work on. I mean, we can definitely increase the predictive capacity. I mean, as there was a question earlier that asked about the noise. Yeah, of course, we only have just one layer of low frequency noise, and there's lots of it. There's little that can be highly refined, and it should be refined. We know that, and we can also make these environmental drivers have different impacts on different species rather than just scare them away. So we can increase complexity, and we can make the predictive capacity of the model much higher. We can distill information to users, to different audiences very differently. We can include MSFD indicators and things like that, so ecological indicators that are more catered to specific audiences. We really would like to include climate change, but one of the downsides of climate change is that this also, again, is not for all audiences, because some people would like to play the MSP game to if I put a wind park in this specific location, what's going to cause that? What's got that wind park going to cause? If you include climate change and temperatures start changing, then the players, it becomes much harder to discern cause from effect. So climate change will have an overarching effect that will start changing things even if players don't take actions. And that is not for every audience. Audiences really would like to see their impact of their actions to how they play out. And others would like to see more, okay, let's include realistic climate change, etc. So we have other ecopath mechanisms that we want to use. We're now currently working with BUAS to explore if we can bring currents into the model and have larval drift, etc. We can run uncertainty assessments, which is highly necessary. We can bring local economics in. There's a lot of things we can do with this, but we set the baseline and we think that's pretty cool. Can I get the next slide, please? So here are a series of references if you'd like to know more. I'm also happy to send some of these papers to you. Please contact me if you want to have them, or I can upload them. Maybe I can share them to the website, to the app, and you can pick them up. But here's much more information of all we've done. And the beef of my story is basically captured in the paper, the Steenbeek et al. 2020 paper, the one at the bottom that recently came out. Last slide, please. So I tried to keep it short. I hope it was informative. If you have questions, please bug me at my email address or in the chat. And yeah, I hope you liked it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. And also thank you, Harald. We really appreciate that you've been here with us and have this fabulous presentation. So there are a lot of questions, but a lot of them are about the technical issues. So I will just select one, and that one is related to any plans. If there are any plans to develop the MSP board game for other non-EU countries?
Yeah, great question. The board game, the MSP Challenge board game is about... Great question. Oh, I'm getting an echo here. Okay. The board game is revolves around a fictional sea basin called the Rika Sea. It doesn't exist in real life. And it's been the different elements of it, the textual elements on the board game have been translated into many different languages and shipped all over the world. So what you can do is through the mspchallenge.info website, you can ask the team whether there's a board game available for you in your language. That's what you can do. So in terms of the sea basin, no need to worry about specific sea basins there, because the board game is around a fictional sea basin. That's on purpose, of course, to make the board game a bit more focused on the actual interactions and the process you go through as a group, as a big group, typically like 20 to 30 people. Of maritime spatial planning. So that's the good thing about the board game there. No need to worry about the specific sea basins, because it's a fictional one anyway. You just need to have one in your language, I guess. And I believe it's been translated into half a dozen different languages from all over the world. So I'm sure there's one available if you have a bit of budget to ship out to you, or maybe there's already one in your country. One of the partners of MSP Global might have one in your country.
Thank you, Harald. And also it was a question to Jeroen. I don't know, Jeroen, if you already answered to that question related to the noise. The noise pressure layer. Regarding the noise pressure layer, did you allocate the different noise frequencies to the different noise emitted human activities? And then,
no, yeah.
Okay, and then based on the intensity of each activity, apply a multiplier to create a heat intensity map?
We did not do that. We have one noise layer now, and we definitely should change that because we know that different species respond differently to different frequency spectra. And also that noise has different effects on species anyway. I mean, some species may lose their way, right? May get lost, or others may stop producing. Others may anyway. So we haven't done that. No, we can refine that greatly. So we can include different noise layers. We kept it simple because we want to have as few interactions between MSP and EcoPath. Tools are demanding, and we want to keep the simulation runtimes as fast as possible. What the pressure layers contain is a very simplified pressure content with a value between 0 and 1 that indicates how much noise of that specific type is there in each cell, derived from the MSP planning actions, which is then enough for the ecospace model to respond to to make the species relocate, and things like that. We can definitely refine that. The heat maps that Harold showed are not the heat. Well, Harold showed the same maps that are fed to EcoPath, basically scaling the colors from 0 to 1 and a linear scale to show the distribution of the surface and bottom disturbance and the distribution of artificial substrate and fisheries protection. The maps that Harold then showed was similar. The ecological outcomes, the biomass densities of the different species are again summarized also from 0 to 1, based on an internal scale that we handle. It's the magnitude of change from the baseline that we show on a logarithmic scale. The paper that we shared explains that better. Which that means that we don't really have to know the absolute value of scales. We just the magnitude of change by 10 orders of magnitude is more than enough. I hope this somewhat helps.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. And one more question. It is possible to buy the board game of the MSP challenge online?
Yes, we don't have a whole shop or something, but you can just get in touch through the website. I believe there's a form somewhere, or just use our generic email address for that. I believe it's contact@mspchallenge.info, and just inquire into purchasing a copy of the board game in your language. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I just want to make an announcement. If anyone needs a certificate of attendance, you can contact Lisa Madison for this. So there are no more questions, as I said, besides the technical issues. So thank you very much to all of you and to all the audience for this amazing day. And we'll continue tomorrow with the second day of our workshop. Thank you very much to all of you. And please send the if you need certificates, please contact Lisa Madison for this. Thank you. Have a nice evening or day or okay. See you tomorrow at 2 p.m. UTC. Thank you very much. And if you, Steph, want to say something in the end, or?
No, nothing specific. Thanks everyone for joining. It was a great day, and thanks for putting up with some of the technical issues we had. And we will see you all tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
It's the same link that we use tomorrow, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, great. So goodbye to everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.